Yeah.
Well, I think I will begin by welcoming you all. Good evening. I'm very happy that you joined us for this second program in our series on reparations. Before the program begins, I do want to give a shout out to some members of the Adult Education Committee whose efforts have made this program possible. Notably, Sally Rosenfeld and Ron Silver and Joanne Truhaft and Jill Slansky. Thank you for your many contributions, including some very relevant materials, which are now on our website. And there's a link to our website that you can find. And also a recording of the past session is there. So our goals for this 4-part series are to educate ourselves about the losses incurred by Portland's minority populations and to examine the issue of making restitution by way of reparations. As we learned from Rabbi Joseph last month, we have the opportunity and the responsibility through reparations to repair the world, which is our Tikkun Olam mandate. Just today, if you got the email that I did, we are being urged by the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism to call on Congress to pass H.R. 40, a bill which was passed 10 months ago by the House Judiciary Committee. So tonight we are privileged to hear from 2 members of the local African American community who will give us some insight into the damage caused by racism and some of the work being done to confront it. Reverend Cecil Prescott and Cameron Whitten are our guests, and Ron Silver will do the introductions and the interviewing. It's all yours, Ron.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Carol. And Carol's really been leading us in this. Okay, here we go. First of all, thank you all very much for being here. This, as Carol said, this is our second opportunity to look at this issue of reparations. There is there's a sort of a national, there's been a national look at reparations, particularly within the African American community, rooted in the issue of slavery. And if you go on our website, the site that got you in here, you'll see that there is you have a link to House Resolution 40, which is a resolution that John Conyers used to introduce year after year. And then after he passed away, it's been reintroduced now in this Congress. Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici and Earl Blumenauer are both co-sponsors of it. And this is to create a commission to a congressionally created commission to study the issue of reparations and see if there is a way that it can be done in our lifetime. And also I put there several links to both testimony by Ta-Nehisi Coates and also to a New Yorker article and a very famous Atlantic article that he wrote several years ago that has really sort of kicked this conversation off. But that's very much a national focus. And one of the objectives that we have in this series is to look at ourselves in the mirror. And because it's all well and good and easy for us here in Oregon to say, well, you know, we were in the North during the Civil War and we didn't have slavery here. Of course, we didn't want any African Americans here either, but you know, that's not our problem. But in fact, if we take a mirror and hold ourselves up to that mirror and take a look, we have things to look at here in Oregon. And so our focus is going to be very much here. So we have 2 people who are going to be presenting tonight. And Cameron, because Reverend Prescott is here, I'm going to go back to having him first, just so you get the heads up. Because what we want to do is first look at sort of the look at Oregon through a historical lens, and we're going to have Reverend Cecil Prescott do that for us. Reverend Prescott is he is the one of the ministers at Ainsworth United Church of Christ. He is a member of the Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon. He's worked with the Urban League, Mackenzie River Gathering Foundation. He's been very involved in the struggle for LGBTQ rights in Oregon. He was very involved in beating back Proposition 9 in the 90s. And I used to do a lot of work with Q Center when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I was very pleased to see that in 2012, he was recognized as one of the queer heroes in the Northwest by Q Center. And so he's going to give us an interesting historical perspective on Oregon. And with that, I want to turn it over to Reverend Prescott. And what I'm going to tell you is, if as you're listening, you have questions, please put them in the chat. I'm going to monitor the chat line, and then I will pose the questions at the end. I'll probably wait until we have Cameron's talk as well, and then I'll throw questions at both of them. And first, I want to start by apologizing to Reverend Prescott, because I think we sent him a bad link for how to get here. And so we were fiddling, trying to get him on, and I appreciate the fact that he fought his way through into our conversation. So Reverend Prescott, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you so much, Ron, and thank you for your patience. And I'm really glad that I finally was able to find the correct link. You know, I was preparing all day, and I said, okay, I'll turn on early enough, and then I started to panic because it was apparently the wrong link. And then I went and searched through my emails, and I didn't know which email to look at. And finally, I saw one that Ron sent just a couple of minutes ago, and I said, okay, maybe this is the one. So thank you all for your patience. And I'd like to begin formally by just acknowledging the fact that we sit on stolen land, and to acknowledge that we sit or stand on land stolen from indigenous people. That, I suppose, form a context for our conversation this evening. Many of you know that when the white settlers first came to this land that we call Oregon, that the provisional government mandated that Blacks who settled in Oregon would be whipped until they left. And this message was clear: Black people were not welcome. We know that the 1857 Constitution banned slavery, but also excluded Blacks from this state. Some Blacks did manage to establish legal residence between 1840 and 1860s, but they were few. And we know that the racist language in the Oregon Constitution was not removed until 2002. And yet 30% of the electorate voted to keep the racist language. The history of Blacks in Oregon is not limited to the Portland metropolitan region. And time prevents me from reflecting on the rich history of African Americans in Eastern Oregon, as well as other regions in the state. I commend to you the work of Taylor Stewart and the Oregon Remembrance Project. Taylor and the Oregon Remembrance Project was started, Taylor helped start the Oregon Remembrance Project in 2018 to help communities in Oregon to unearth the stories, the unknown stories of injustice, and engage in the necessary truth-telling and repair required to reconcile instances of historical harm. And the Oregon Remembrance Project connects historical racism to the present-day legacies in order to inspire contemporary racial justice action. And I think that connects with our conversation this evening, how to connect the history and inspire us to continue the contemporary racial justice action, which is necessary and needed today. And I think it's important just to remember that from the work of the Oregon Remembrance Project, that their work documented and memorialized Alonzo Tucker, who is the only documented African-American victim of lynching in Oregon. And Mr. Tucker was lynched in Coos Bay on September 18, 1902. About the time Mr. Tucker was lynched in Coos Bay, there were about 1,100 Blacks living in Portland. Most of the Blacks were living in Northwest Portland or inner Northeast Portland, and that should not be a surprise because they lived around Union Station. And the rails were one of the few places where Blacks could find steady employment. By 1930, at the start of the Great Depression, there were 84 Black businesses established in Portland. We all know that by time World War II came, the number of African Americans exploded tenfold because of the shipbuilding industry. Blacks from the South and the Southwest came towards Portland because of the need for more people and the promise of employment. We all know this, are familiar perhaps with the story of Vanport, that city that became the second largest city in Oregon. During the war, about 30,000 people lived in Vanport. 6,000 were Blacks. Now we know the history. We know how Blacks were not welcome in Oregon. So it should not come as a surprise that at the end of the war, the city fathers, they were mostly men, wanted to make sure that those who had arrived in Portland a few years earlier found a way to exit. Blacks were made well aware of the fact that they were not welcome, but yet many stayed in spite of the efforts of the city fathers to have them leave. We may be familiar with the Vanport flood towards the end of the 1940s, which drove Black people into the Albina district in Portland. And again, Blacks were not welcome. The housing they found was not adequate. In 1957, the City Club issued a report called The Negro in Portland, which showed that 90% of realtors in the city would not sell to Black people. Well, we all are familiar, or should be familiar, of the destruction of the community that Black people established in spite of everything else. The project of the Memorial Coliseum, I-5, and Highway 99 projects destroyed many Blacks' homes and businesses. And throughout the 60s and 70s, there was very little improvement, no improvement at all. And then we come to the 70s, and we're all familiar, or should be familiar, with the Emmanuel Hospital expansion project that demolished large numbers of Black homes. Continue a pattern. You are not welcome. We will destroy, make it difficult for you to live here. We will move you out and force you out. And the Emmanuel Hospital expansion project could be seen as maybe the lasting blow to destroy the Black community in Portland. And yet, Black people remained and continued to live in spite of it all. Well, we're familiar with the hospital, Emmanuel Hospital apology, and the efforts to make promises to restore or recompense the community that was destroyed. And we know of the city's promises that things will be different. And those promises are heard administration after administration. This afternoon, I took a walk around my neighborhood, which was once the vital center of African American life in Portland. Now, I consider myself somewhat of a newbie in Portland. I moved here 36 years ago. After the planned destruction of the community was on its way, but yet enough of the core, both physical and in memory, was intact. Where once were homes where families raised their children, where Black families raised their children. As I walk in my neighborhood, I notice that few of these homes, or where the homes once stood, were inhabited by Black people. I walked down block and I remember my friend's Mary mom's house. I remember visiting her mother in that house. Walk a couple of blocks over and I walked by Mary's sister's home. I remember one day going to that home and bringing some food to Mary's sister. Down the block was my good friend's Dwayne and his grandmother's house. And remember Dwayne used to go and visit his grandmother on weekends. And those were just some of the homes I remembered. And I remember past other homes of people I knew and no longer lived there, or their families no longer lived there. And I've only been here a few decades, but I feel the grief and the pain and sorrow of loss. One cannot understate the profound impact that urban renewal, gentrification has had on the Black community. I commend to you what is probably the latest document of reams of papers that have been produced over the last few decades about the Black community in Portland and why it disappeared. This document, a 2021 document called Reclamation Towards the Futurity of Central Albina. Reclamation Towards the Futurity of Central Albina. That's a new word for me. It was written by Ariel Kane, Aubrey Carlson, Stephanie Greenslade, Jude Thaddeus, and Zachary Metler. It's a Master of Urban and Regional Planning workshop project of Portland State University in collaboration with Emmanuel Displaced Peoples Association 2. Emmanuel Displaced Persons Association 2, which is a collective of individuals and families who have been displaced from their homes, from their families' homes. I think it's interesting that this is the second iteration. So it's the Emmanuel Displaced Persons Association 2. A few decades ago, there was the original Emmanuel Displaced Persons Association. Well, this study is in line with, as I mentioned, other studies that have been produced over the past few decades, which have talked about what happened to a once vital community and the challenges the city must face if it wants to address the harm inflicted to the Black community over the past century. And it says in part, but this history is alive in the present. There are many people today who still remember the neighborhoods that were taken from them. And there are many more descendants who have grown up hearing about Central Albina as it was before bulldozers arrived. So long as the impact caused by structural racist practices go unaddressed, Black people will continue to face disproportionate challenges to well-being and prosperity in Portland. So how do we repair and make right this situation? Well, we must continue the hard work that is some of the work that you are doing tonight and during this series. The hard work of knowing the history, of seeking what must we do to make things right? What role do the faith community and people of goodwill play beyond parting city officials? What must we do to discern the right paths we might build? What are our collective responsibility? There are many people engaged in trying to understand what or how do we do reparation in our place, in our city now. Many people are doing very creative works of imagining or maybe reimagining what that means. You'll hear some of the work that some of the great imaginative work that Cameron has been doing over these years in creating new and creative ways of reparations. And as part of our conversation this evening and in the conversation moving on, we will share our thoughts and our visions and our hopes of what a renewed, restored community will look like and be. And yet, they remained. The city fathers after World War II tried their best efforts, along with realtors and others, to dismantle the Black community, and yet they remained. The challenge for us is to hold on to the promise that the Black community had and work together to imagine a new way of being community. Those are some of my thoughts this evening. Thank you so much for listening to some of my rambling thoughts. And I look forward to our conversation this evening. But first, I'm looking forward to the wise words of Cameron. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much, Reverend. Yeah, well done. Just a few things I wanted to just highlight. Tracy has put into the chat links to both the Oregon Black Pioneers, which is an absolutely wonderful organization that really details the fact that African Americans have been in Portland, have been in Oregon since before we were a state. Pretty much like right around, well, in fact, we've been here, the African American community has been here before John Jacob Astor set up Astoria. It goes way back. Think about York for starters. We put in a link to that. Also put in a link to the Oregon Remembrance Project, the amazing work that Taylor Stewart did creating the monument in Coos Bay. And Taylor was, he was inspired to do that by his visit to the lynching legacy memorial in Montgomery that Brian Stevenson, who was our speaker for Dr. King's holiday several years ago, created. So there's a link to the Oregon Remembrance Project. Reverend Prescott, I have a quick question for you. Can we get access to the reclamation towards the futurity, new word for me too, of Central Albina? Is that a document we can get access to and
Yeah,
available?
I'm placing a link in the chat right now.
Fabulous. Thank you very, very much. Okay, so now, yeah, we're gonna turn it over to Cameron Whitten, and I'm glad we were, Reverend Prescott, you focused so much on the housing issue. I was realizing, Cameron, I was remembering that you and I really got to know each other beginning, I'll say maybe 12 years ago, when we were on one of
I'm
Donna
not that
Maxey's-
old, Ron Silver.
Oh yeah, live with it. Donna Maxey has done these wonderful events called Race Talks, and we did one on fair housing, and Cameron was the moderator, and I was on the panel because of my role in the U.S. Attorney's Office with Ellen Rosenblum and Joanne Hardesty. And since then, Cameron has just gone on to do amazing things. Was with Q Center for a long time, and then has created, and really why we want you here is because between what you did with the Black Resiliency Fund and creating BrownHope, it really speaks to, what happens if the African American community can get access to money and to funds and resources. And so if you can just kind of tell us about your journey, which has been a remarkable journey all of its own, and what you've been able to do with both the fund and BrownHope, that would be great, Cameron.
Ron Silver, thank you.
I'm going to go mute.
Reverend Cecil Prescott, thank you so much. And I have no idea who these men are that are introducing me. I am not wise. And I didn't know I was supposed to be talking about my life story. So how much time does everybody have tonight? I am so grateful to be here today. Congregation Beth Israel, congregation that is so much family to me and my heart. It is such an honor to be here tonight. Also got to participate earlier this year with the annual MLK Shabbat. And so Tikkun Olam, y'all do that work every single day. And it's just an honor just to be a little fragment of your healing work on this world. My name is Cameron Whitten. My pronouns are he, him. All pronouns are extremely welcome. And I am a human. I am an American, I'm a neighbor, and I'm a Portlander. And I am the founder and CEO and Chief Healing Officer for racial justice nonprofit BrownHope. And honestly, the part of my story that I want to talk about, again, is about repair. And unfortunately, the things that we repair are things that have been broken. And look no further than this speaker right here. My life started with serious breaking. I grew up in a broken home. I had a mother and father who were abusive to me and my siblings. And by the time that I turned 18 years of age, I didn't have a single hope or dream for my future because I honestly didn't believe that I deserved one. I honestly didn't see value in my own life. The only way I could repair that was to leave my family, my home, everything behind. And at 18 years of age, heading west into the great unknown, no matter the danger, no matter the possibility, all of that was a better outcome than where I came from. And this was my outcome, coming here to Portland. And I came here in 2009, middle of the Great Recession, and I was homeless. And I didn't have to be. My very first night in Oregon was actually in Albany, which is about 2 hours outside of Portland. And I stayed at a friend's dad's house for one night. And after that night, the friend's dad told us all to leave because he was uncomfortable having a Black man in his house. At this time, I was 18 years of age. And so I honestly knew nothing of Oregon. The only thing I knew about Oregon was the Oregon Trail video game. So I knew that this is where Jackie died of dysentery. Sorry for any Jackies in the audience. And so when this happened, when this man looked at me and the color of my skin and denied me something as basic, as righteous as housing, I honestly thought it was absurd. I never would have believed that there were racist people in Oregon. Well, fast forward a decade, I found the racist people in Oregon, and there's a lot of them. And for a long time, it wasn't funny. Racism is still absurd, by the way, but we also know that it's extremely painful. I know it through my own story, and I know it through the stories of far too many folks who have so much to offer and contribute to this beloved community, and yet every single day walking out of their houses, if they have them, and being seen and treated as different, other, and less. So the work I do today is not really work I do by choice. It is work that I did for surviving and work that I did for thriving. And that work started for me with BrownHope in 2018. I've been in Portland at that time 9.5 years. I had landed, which to me at that time was my dream job with the city of Portland. And unfortunately, like too many Black folks with the city, within 6 months, I was let go with no warning, notice whatsoever. Turns out I was too dark and too honest, and I promise I will never put those two qualities on a resume ever again. And I remember in that moment, having to face a really, really difficult question. I've been in Portland now for a decade, and I have struggled and clawed and just fought and worked so hard to finally grasp my dream, the dream that I came to Portland for the first place. And yet, after 10 years of struggling to land a good career, to have a close network of supportive friends, to actually feel like for the first time in my life, that my life actually mattered. And after 10 years, still, I was coming up across a wall. And I did not know why I was still here. I woke up 2 days after being fired. And I don't know why, but a dream finally came to me. And it was just 7 words. Portland needs a Red Cross for Black people. And I remember when those words came to my mind, something about me just activated. And I remember in bed, just waking up, fired up and thinking, oh my gosh, this is the best idea ever. They better watch out because I'm about to get the Nobel Peace Prize, Albert Einstein, I'm coming for you. And I just said, what are we gonna call this thing? And ultimately, I thought about what was it that Portland needed? What was that object? What was that symbol? What were we missing here? And the answer was, of course, oh, I can't share my screen. I do have a short presentation if I can present, but if not, the answer, of course, is BrownHope. And I remember the moment when those two seemingly innocuous words, BrownHope, came together. And I felt this wave coursing through my body. This wave of acceptance, of healing, and of love. And I said to myself, wow, every single person needs to have this feeling every single day of their lives. So who knows, maybe I became an adopted Jew that day because the energy of Tikkun Olam was just coursing through my body. And we have never stopped since that fateful day in 2018. So now I have a co-host. Now I can share my screen. if I can find my slide. Here we go. Wonderful. So here's BrownHope. And our mission is to plant and nurture seeds for racial justice. We uplift, connect, and celebrate Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities to inspire our collective healing. Our work centers on racial trauma. We know that for centuries, Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities have lived through historical and ongoing racial trauma, which we define as a wounding that has been passed from generation to generation. We developed this theory of change through BrownHope, where we act as a bridge between people from different backgrounds to inspire action and nurture a world of healing and justice. We do that through our 4 core strategies. First and foremost, we do that through nourishing abundance. Our world has adopted a mindset of scarcity for far too long. There's an abundance of resources, of love, of time to ensure that everyone has enough. And so within our organization, within every single one of our programs, we approach everything that we do with a strong commitment to a growth mindset and an abundance philosophy. 2, we work through building multiracial momentum. And honestly, here in Oregon, there's not enough of us. We have to work together if we truly want to build the vision of a racially just and thriving Oregon that we all need and deserve. And so we do that work, both within our mission of serving Black, Brown, Indigenous folks. We also work extremely closely with our racially privileged allies, because we know all of us have been harmed by the trauma and disease of racism, and all of us must partake in the healing. Next, we inspire healing justice. This is challenging work because racism is more than a policy. Racism is more than our history. Racism is alive in all of our bodies, and it takes the form of trauma. And we do not see enough resources and strategies that are actually focused on the liberation of our bodies, so that finally the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual shackles of racial trauma are taken off of our bodies and we can live our best lives. And so at BrownHope, we inspire healing justice through a lens where we start at the individual and we build up to interpersonal, community, and finally with systems change. And for us, we take healing very seriously. We take inspiration from experts in our field, such as our Surgeon General, Vivek Murphy, and the Surgeon General of California, Nadine Burke-Harris. We also take so much expertise from those who came before us, our ancestors, those who have developed healing practices since time immemorial. We call these things magic. We know through food, through song, through prayer, through scripture, all of these things have encoded mysteries of healing that we still need and use to this day. And so our healing justice framework combines both the science and the magic to make sure that healing is forever lasting. And then finally, we plant seeds of change. And what we mean by that is that we are trying to repair the world. And that means repairing our relationship with the world. We have made things so complicated nowadays with our TikToks and our tax forms and whatever bureaucracy you have to do just to get a picture on a card to drive a car. Things are so complicated and so detached from our relationship with the basic cycle of life and nature. And so at BrownHope, we're in the process of rewilding. We are taking action against the status quo by going back to our roots, by finding the wisdom within our bones and living our lives and living within this organization in the way that we as humans have always meant to live and thrive. Challenging work, but it's successful work. We have 6 programs. We have Black Resilience Fund, which we'll talk about a little bit. We have Power Hour, which is our original program. We have Solidarity Squad, pictured here, which is our mutual aid village building program, where we are providing opportunities for neighbors to work directly with neighbors for their own resilience. We have Blackstreet Bakery, which is a program that is providing an economic anchor for Black folks in North and Northeast Portland. We have Equity and Beyond, which we have an Equity Beyond participant here in the audience, which is a learning experience for racial justice, where we bring people of different backgrounds to build real relationships and collective action for racial justice. And then finally, we have our Healing Initiatives, which is an incubator for new ideas and strategies to foster lasting healing. A lot's happened in the last 3 years. First and foremost, when we launched in 2018, we almost immediately ended up on the New York Times and Fox News. What the heck happened here? But our first event ever was on the topic of reparations. It was called Reparations Happy Hour. Today it's called Power Hour. But it was amazing to see what we thought was a tiny event with 40 people attending became a worldwide conversation. And it was because people didn't know what to think of it. I created Reparations Happy Hour because we were getting a lot of feedback from the community that there was not enough spaces for safety, for solidarity, for people just to let go of their burden, let go of the pain and suffering and the forced tolerance, the forced strength that people have had to use to navigate their lives in Portland. And so we made that space, but it didn't really sit well with me that once again, we were expecting the work of healing to rest on the backs of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. So I said, sure, I can do monthly events, whatever, but we need to do better. And so we brought in the spirit of reparations into this event. And we asked our racially privileged allies to participate by staying home and opening their wallets. And we made sure that every single Black, Brown, and Indigenous person who participated in this event went home with money in their pocket, because we know these folks were doing the work to co-create this space, taking time away from their family, from friends, from work, from other healing activities to help really build that vibrant vision of the Oregon we all need and deserve. Folks thought it was funny. Folks thought it was strange. The idea that we can actually use the abundance of our resources to build healing spaces that people want to be a part of, that people finally feel seen and validated in. Well, for the folks who were laughing 3 years ago, Power Hour now is a weekly program operated via Zoom. We have over 150 Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks who are there building resilient lives for themselves, but also building and inspiring resilience for every other person in the space. And we're just getting started.
Well, a bar in Portland, Oregon.
No, we're not listening to Tucker Carlson. He is not invited to this party. Next, we'll talk about Black Resilience Fund, which of course, you might have heard the name. Black Resilience Fund was started in the summer of 2020, 5 days after the tragic and unjustifiable murder of George Floyd. And Black Resilience Fund, of course, tied closely to my own story and my own experience here in Portland. And I'll be honest, when I first heard the headlines about George Floyd's murder, I was jaded. I braced myself. It was not the first time, honestly, that I ever heard the terms, "I can't breathe." It was not the first time, not even in that year, that we had a horrible video of a Black man slowly having his life taken away from him and seeing that video shared across the world. So honestly, when I saw those headlines, it was hard for me because there was nothing new there. There was absolutely nothing new about that moment. And there was no reason for me to expect that anything would be different. However, as we all know, this moment was different. So within 5 days, the Black Resilience Fund was launched. And immediately, this community in Portland channeled their grief, their anguish, their despair into something better. And that was our resilience. And so within the first day, we raised over $55,000 for Black Portlanders. By the next day, it was over $155,000. And within 29 days, we raised $1 million to support the basic emergency needs of Black Portlanders, from housing to utilities, to groceries, to childcare, and more. And I already said all this stuff. I will say it continues to be a catalyst to this day for direct cash assistance and other community services in 2021 and beyond. And to this day, it's distributed over $2.5 million since it started in 2020. Some of the unique things about the Black Resilience Fund, again, inspired by the framework of reparations, is that we put community first. 82% of participants said they preferred the Black Resilience Fund continue to make $300 grants to applicants, so as many Black Portlanders as possible could receive support. 92% of participants reported that the application submission process was very easy or easy to complete. And 99% of participants would recommend BRF to others, and shared what made Black Resilience Fund particularly game-changing was access to direct cash assistance with no barriers, no means testing, and no interrogation. This is what liberation looks like, ladies and gentlemen. We continued to partner with the community. For example, we have our annual Juneteenth celebration. We encourage y'all to participate. For the last 2 years, we've had over 160 local small businesses in Portland who have shared up to 100%, but mostly 19% of their profits over the weekend of Juneteenth to the Black Resilience Fund. Once again, the work to truly celebrate liberation and freedom from slavery happens to this day. And so we are so thankful to all of our local businesses and all of the Portlanders who patronize those businesses, supporting our work with Juneteenth. We also developed this awareness campaign with a number of local community members, and we're almost at time, so I'm gonna go. This is one of the most powerful quotes we had from Adolf, a BRF recipient. As a senior citizen, I was going to physical therapy to assist with my walking. Then COVID happened. I had a car accident. I was struggling. This fund gave me emotional strength to believe and have hope again. Isn't he so beautiful? We have a lot of time to talk about well, we don't have a lot of time to talk about reparations, but there's a lot of great resources. KGW interviewed myself, a professor from Portland State University, Senator Lou Frederick, KGW Straight Talk. We can share this presentation afterwards so you can watch that video. Should not put videos in this presentation. Also, last year, I was interviewed on a podcast called Dear White Whippen. We had an hour-long conversation around the concept of reparations, talking both about it on a local level, but also on a national level. Reparations, as you all know, repairing the world can happen anywhere. Can happen with one person, can happen with 330 million people. We just have to believe. Okay, with that, that ends my presentation. Just in summary, BrownHope's work is about healing. It is about reparations. We decided that we were not going to wait until HR 40 or some other policy was going to get passed on a national level. Reparations is an act of intent, it is an intention, it is now. And so we are so thankful to every person here who has been a supporter of BrownHope in whatever way. We see you, Ron Silver. We see you, Libby Schwartz. Rabbi, I'm not sure if I've seen you. I'm gonna check my donor records because I'm not sure. But I have seen all of you in so many ways be a part of repairing the world. So grateful to be here tonight, and I'm looking forward to our Q&A. Thank you.
Well, to Cameron and to, yeah, I am unmuted. Yeah, to Cameron and to Reverend Prescott, just thank you so much for this wonderful presentation that really speaks to how there are so many paths to this idea of reparations. And it goes back to what Rabbi Joseph was teaching us last time, which is this is part of our Jewish tradition, that you should not go out empty. And so I appreciate it. Now, I've been looking at the chat and I haven't seen questions put in there. If you have questions for Cameron or Cecil, please put them in there. I guess what I would, let me go back to Reverend Prescott, because from Cameron, we heard a lot of real specific issues around, this is what we're doing with our money, et cetera. There's a whole aspect, when I take people on the Black History of Portland tours, I take them to what I call the apology wall at Emmanuel Hospital. I also show them all the vacant land that was wiped out and then nothing put on it. But I take them to the apology wall at Emmanuel Hospital. And for those of you who have not been to Emmanuel Hospital, it's really quite remarkable. If you walk in there to the cafeteria area, there is an entire wall where the hospital says, "I'm sorry." And I guess for Reverend Prescott, what does that mean? What is the, how much value does that have in your judgment? Go ahead and unmute yourself. Yeah. Thanks.
There's the cynical New Yorker in me who say, there's no value or little value or show me the money. But I think it is important to make steps. And one of the important steps, especially in these days when there is so much, I think, attempt to reframe, to change, to alter, all this stuff around, what should be taught in school and what books can be read or not read, because we want to protect our children. We don't want them to feel sorry. I think to say that we are sorry and this is why is important. Now that's not the final step. And I think it's important, that's an initial step, but it's really important, I think, to acknowledge what happened and to begin the process of making repair by just acknowledging the wrong. So
I'd love to add, and I would say the real apology wall for Emmanuel Hospital is those 2 blocks of completely undeveloped land that used to house the city hall for the city of Albina, that used to be 2 blocks of vibrant Black businesses and stores and shops and housing and more. Vibrant, 400 homes demolished because of Legacy Emmanuel. I feel like there should be a t-shirt that says 400 demolished walls, 400 demolished wall, 400 demolished homes, and all I have is an apology wall and a cafeteria that most people don't even know is there. Legacy Emmanuel needs to do better, as we all need to do better. And I think that's been my biggest frustration, is the bar of apology is set so low that an apology wall in a cafeteria is seen as an act. I expect more from this community. I'm hopeful that there are groups that are finally trying to turn the tide and to make sure that our apologies are tangible and that real repair can happen. An organization that I'd love to shout out right now is the Albina Vision Trust. They have a decade-long dream to reclaim physical space in North Portland that is centering the Black community. And I believe that bold visions like those are the real apology that Black Portlanders need.
Yeah, no, the Albina Vision Trust, great shout out. Libby Schwartz did ask a question, and I posed it to both of you. And I really spoke to this in the first session where I talked about the fact that my parents were able to move into a neighborhood in West Los Angeles 10 years before any African Americans did. And the difference in those 10 years in the value of that house was astronomical. So what Libby is asking is, what can we do to try to help the BIPOC community develop access to building generational wealth?
Libby, I love that question. And I'm going to answer it really through what I think is both practical, but also systems changed focus. And I come from my own perspective of having been someone who has been at the bottom of wealth, who experienced homelessness, houselessness here in the city, who slept in shelters, who had to use nonprofit housing in order to get to stability. And what I knew back then and what I know now is that there are a lot of resources and infrastructure to support wealth building that we put in a dumpster and we light on fire. There is so much red tape and bureaucracy within local government programs and nonprofit programs that are all built on the idea that you can't trust Black folks with money. And it is a waste of resources and it is a waste of wealth. And so my worry is we have these conversations about how to generate wealth. How do we have conversations about how we are literally throwing away wealth? And we're throwing it away in bureaucracy. We're also throwing it away to overpaid staff that don't represent Black communities whatsoever. We need to make some serious changes in the ways that we currently use to have safety nets and actually ensure that the way that these programs and systems are operated put community first and ensure that the dollars we have available go directly into the pockets of Black folks. I think that is a tangible and a very systems focused way to make an immediate impact.
I would just add that that we should follow what I think Cameron has shared with us about the Black Resilience Fund. And that is believe that the people know what to do with the money. Yes, cut the red tape and all the hoops you have to jump through. We are, that people who are survivors. Begin by showing us the money.
The Cuba Gooding corner in this conversation today. It's absolutely true. Susan Berniker had asked if you all could comment on the group United in Spirit. Do you know? And Rabbi Kahana put into the chat that this is it's organized under the Jewish Community Relations Council. So I'm curious, are either of you familiar with United in Spirit?
I'm not.
Okay. So but along that line, because this is the other part of what Susan was asking, is allyship. Comment, if you would, on that. The importance, the usefulness, how not to have an ally fall all over themselves. How do we do that?
How do you do that? By getting back up again. And I wish I was joking, but that is the work. All of us stumble and fall. And there's this issue in our communities where we need to appear and perform like the perfect ally. We call that performative allyship. And those are folks who want to look graceful, like they do a triple axel while they are being an ally. Is that what you really want to be? Is that how you really want to look? Because you look like a figure skater when you're supposed to be doing grunt work for racial justice. You're supposed to be looking dirty with a potato sack around you like a dress. That is the work of racial justice. The allies I know look like Ron Silver, who is beautiful, but you know he's tired. You know he's tired. That is what an ally looks like. So I don't even give an answer. You're looking at one right here, Ron Silver.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you. Reverend Prescott.
Cameron said it all. I would just say you shouldn't stop at a triple axel. I watched Nathan Chen, and I want to be like he. But the idea that Nathan, has fallen many times and got up. And as Cameron said, we don't have to be perfect or appear to be perfect. We just have to be human. Just be human and be yourself.
Good answer. Well, folks, it is after 8 o'clock. I pushed it to about 8:10 because I wanted to have some time to do some Q&A. Thank you again so very much, Cameron, Reverend Prescott, Cecil. Thank you so much for being with us, talking about reparations, opening yourselves up to us, and laying out your stories of your life and painful stuff. And I appreciate it very much. I appreciate everybody who joined us. Reverend Prescott, you started by saying the very first thing you talked about was us acknowledging that we're on stolen land. And I don't know if you know this, but our next session is going to be to look at reparations through the lens of the indigenous community. We're going to be joined by our own congregant, Professor Tracy Prince, and by law professor Bob Miller, who's an enrolled member of one of the tribes from the Midwest, who is a professor of Indian law, among many other things. And we're going to look at the fact that we are on stolen land. And so again, thank you, everybody. We are going to take some of the things that we put into the chat today, and we're going to put them on the website, so get access to them that way. Tracy doesn't know that, but we're going to do that. And so again, Rabbi Kahana, thank you for being with us. Carol and Sally, thank you for so much you've been doing to make these happen. And Cameron and Cecil, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so very much for being with us. And everybody have a great night.
Thank you all so much. Really, really beautiful and important. Great, very grateful. Ron, thank you.
You're welcome.
And to the Adult Education Committee for taking on this very important conversations.